I'm going to walk you through the process, or at least attempt to walk you through the process of getting a Thai driver's license. This video is aimed towards those having to take the test from scratch. That is, if you don't already have a driver's license from your home country and have to take the written and the driving test. If you have a license from your home country already and it isn't expired, you can watch this video instead. If you, like me, have to get your license from scratch, you should still watch the previous video as it details the physical tests that you need to take prior to taking the class, as well as the written and driving tests. And when I say physical test here, I'm talking about tests that test your vision, your reflexes, things of that nature, not the actual driving test itself. You still have to take those tests along with the other stuff that the guys who are just doing license transfers don't have to do. So the process is to show up to the driver's license office. I believe it is 8 a.m. on the dot in all of the offices, but I could be wrong. Check with the officer behind the front desk at the Land Transportation Office and they will tell you when to show up. For people taking the full class, they only offer those on 2 days of the week. In the Khon Kaen office, that was Wednesday and Friday. Now, the Khon Kaen office is nice and efficient and I really enjoyed it, so I didn't have a problem with the scheduling that they had. I mean, it wasn't really all that crowded and the people were relatively affable. Now, despite the fact that the class is offered on Wednesdays and on Fridays, you can take the driving test on any of the days. If you fail your written test, for example, you can come back the next day, regardless of what day it is, and retake that written test. They will keep your paperwork and you will only need to retake the parts that you failed. From what I could gather, this included the driving test as well. There were 6 people who failed 1 or 2 parts of the previous day's test, and they came back to try to retake that part, and they only had to do the specific part that they failed. For example, one young man was pretty horrendous at the 7-point parallel parking test, and that was the only part that he needed to retake. He failed it again, and I think his mother convinced the officer to try to have him take it again that same day, and he did, and the poor guy did pass the 3rd time. So once you filled out your application at the front desk, you will be instructed to go to the physical test room where you will need to take your 4 tests shown here. Again, if you want a full detailed explanation of what these tests entail, please refer to this video. You really should watch it before watching this video anyways. Now, once you've passed all the physical tests, it is time to go to class. The class is normally around 9 to 10 a.m. depending on when everybody passes their physical tests. They wait until everybody in the room actually passes the physical portion of the test before starting the class. The class will last 5 hours with a lunch break regardless of when the class begins. You'll be handed a booklet which is used by the instructor when she is going through some of the material. Ours covered roughly 10 pages of the booklet and did a fine job expounding upon the points in the booklet. She didn't just read from the book. She went into detail about what the rules actually meant. However, it was all done in Thai and the instructor only teaches the portion of the booklet not already covered in the video. The video itself lasted about 3.5 hours, somewhere around there, if I can remember correctly. It may have been longer. I'm going to give props where props is due. The Thai government does a really good job trying to make the material not so dry for its citizens. It's done in the style of a Thai corn. Don't worry, there's no unfortunate chauvinist scenes or anything like that. It's got a full production and it has the same silly sound effects that you would hear on those soap operas. The production value is about the same. The lessons are done in silly sketches and don't skimp on the details, but at least tries to make the material not so boring. It's a shame though that people in the classroom weren't really paying attention. I mean, this is essential information for driving in the kingdom after all. It's a wonder the accidents on the roads are so bad. By the way, I don't know what it's like in the other land transportation offices, but the cafeteria in the Khon Kaen office made some super delicious Thai food, so I ain't complaining. After the class is over, we are then instructed to proceed to the written examination room. There are lockers on the outside to put your belongings and your cell phones in. You need to bring your passport and scan it during the test. If your passport doesn't scan, it can be manually typed into the computer, and the officer in the test room will assist you with that. The good news is that the test is both in Thai and in English, your choice of which language to take. The questions are all random and no two tests are exactly the same, so this decreases the urge of people beside you to cheat, though I saw no instances of that happening anyways. The bad news is you need to score 90%. You're asked 50 questions and you need to get 45 of those correct, and some of the questions are not all that logical. For example, if you are asked the following question, for example, what do you consider a serious crime? Extortion, murder, or smuggling? I think most folks would say all of them, but only one of those answers can be correct on a multiple choice question. Luckily, this is not a common scenario, though I did run across one of the questions where I was like, well, all of these are bad. Next, a certain percentage of the questions are hard to follow just due to the English translation. I used the following application to study with, and it is very close to the test. Some of the questions were even verbatim, and you can see what the questions are like and what the translations amount to. Some kind of feel like word salad when you're reading it, so I resorted for those questions to just plain rote memorization. It didn't matter if I really understood what it was trying to ask. I knew what the answer was supposed to be, and I just memorized it for that particular word salad question. Unfortunately, there was I think 5 to 10 questions in the list of questions that I had studied that did that. Fortunately, on the test that I took with the Land Transportation Office, only 3 of the questions were really worded so strangely that I just resorted to rote memorization. But then again, 3 is a lot when you're really sweating bullets and you're trying to pass, right? I failed the written test the first time. I needed 45 out of 50. That's 90%, but I scored 43 out of 50. 43 out of 50. My heart was broken. I really wanted to get this thing over with. But a fail is a fail, and ultimately, several of the questions, 3 as a matter of fact, if I can remember correctly, were on me. I should have known the answers, but I did not know the answers because I had not studied enough. So I just went back to the drawing board, cried myself to sleep and just studied again. Went back and took it the next day. So, point being, you really need to study this test, and the only real way that worked for me was just taking the test on the application. Now, there are applications that you can download for this. I'm going to give you QR codes to the ones that I used, and like I said, several of the questions on the test were verbatim to the ones that I took here on these applications. I have no affiliation with this company or the application itself, by the way, so I'm not trying to promote it for my own use or anything. I just found them useful. So after gathering myself and coming back the next day to take the test again, I passed it this time. That's when I pooped a gold brick when the officer told me it was time for me to take my motorcycle test. I'm looking at her like, what? What motorcycle test, lady? What are you doing to me? And that's when I found out that I was really dense and I had actually applied for 2 licenses, a car driver's license and a motorcycle driver's license, and she wasn't about to have me back out of it, so I was like, gulp, let me try it. When I took the motorcycle test, it was basically just the driver's test again. Again, it's not the exact same questions. You're getting a random set of questions, but they're drawing from the same pool of questions. This time, I'd say about 3 or 4 of the questions were geared specifically towards motorcyclists. Other than that, it was really just the same kind of test. I passed it, luckily, much to her surprise. Once you've passed your written test, you're to proceed to the driving test building. The one in Khon Kaen was just across the parking lot. There, you are to sit and watch a 15-minute video that's in Thai, that explains the testing procedure and when you are to stop and start. If you just watch the video alone, you can kind of figure out what it is that they expect of you without having to know the language at all. Luckily, I did know some of the language, so I was able to figure it out. Special note here, you need to bring your own vehicle. That was really frustrating for me because not having a license at all, you can't really rent a vehicle. You're in a kind of like a catch-22 situation. My mother had lost her international driver's permit, so she couldn't lease a car. For reasons I won't get into, her family would not be of any use to us in that kind of a circumstance. And none of my friends and I are in touch with each other right now. They don't even know I'm alive right now, I don't think. Nor do most of them have cars themselves anyways. I end up persuading a lady to basically rent a car to me. She ran a small rental car company in downtown Khon Kaen and was willing to deliver a car to me specifically for me to take that test with, at which point, once I passed the test, they would just take the car back. So she had a driver come out the next day and present the car to me, and that's how I was able to do it. But you are responsible for having your own vehicles. So if you're doing the math correctly, it took me 3 days to actually get a driver's license. I failed the written test on the first day, came back the second day, passed the written test, got my motorcycle driver's license because I was able to rent from the guy that worked there, but realized that I couldn't take the driving test for the car because I didn't have a car. So I had to come back a third day and take the test then. Hopefully you're not going to have to waste 3 days to do this. The process was not fun. Not fun at all, but it was necessary. I needed to do it. So, if you want to drive in the kingdom, do what you need to do. So for the motorcycle test, it's pretty simple. My dumbass hadn't driven a scooter since 1998 in Key West, and that was with a hangover. And the scooters in Key West are capped at 25 miles per hour to prevent folks from killing themselves. If you've ever visited Key West, you'll understand what I'm saying. On the first test, there's a thin strip of paint with a slight elevated gravel that you're going to have to drive across. I don't really know how wide it is, but it's not wide at all. I wouldn't doubt if it was even as wide as your scooter is going to be. You've got to drive across it. It was not easy for me because I hadn't ridden one in years, since 1998. But by some small miracle, I went over it without issue. Then you go down a second track, which is basically the same thing as the first, but you're trying not to touch cones on either side, these little yellow rods or orange rods. The third test is you just doing kind of like an S pattern in between cones, like just going to the left of one cone and then to the right of another. But that's it. Once you've done that, then you've passed the motorcycle test. It took me less than 10 minutes and I had passed the test, much to my extreme delight and surprise. For the car test, once I managed to find somebody who was willing to rent me a car, and I came back the next day, you follow the officer exactly on what they're telling you to do. Like I said, the 15-minute video that precedes you're actually taking the test explains exactly what is expected of you. But on the first test, basically what you're doing is you're skirting the side of the track, no more than 25 centimeters from the curb on the left, making sure you're within that 25 centimeter mark, but not touching the curb itself. So it's a little bit stressful, especially since I hadn't driven in 6 years or so. So I was really not in the mood to go through this, and I was cursing myself for being in that situation. There are supposed to be sensors that make sure that you're close enough, but ours were not working. I had friends who also said that when they took their test, they mentioned that the sensors weren't working for them either. So it was basically the officer just visually looking at what you were doing. The second test is basically you driving between orange rods and trying not to touch them, then doing it backwards, then doing it forward. They didn't seem to care if I was looking over my shoulder as I was going backwards or if I was using the rearview mirror. It didn't matter as long as I wasn't touching the rods on either side of that. Now, the third test seems to be everybody's least favorite test, and I've never really had a problem with this. It's parallel parking. The only problem was I was seated in a driver's seat that was flipped opposite of what I was used to, and I was doing it opposite of the way that I would be doing it in the States. So that was a little bit disorienting, but again, it's just parallel parking for me. There's a wonderful video on how to do it. It's called the 7-step process. From what I could determine, the officer didn't care if you did it in 7 steps, so long as you were able to do it and you didn't touch the rods. Now, I don't know if this is common throughout the testing facilities throughout Thailand, but in Khon Kaen, they basically just want you to be able to do it. And that seems to be a problem with a lot of people because that was the part that most people were failing. Once you've passed the test, the officer will hand you the paperwork and you'll proceed to the admin office where you'll pay 205 baht for the car license. If you get a motorcycle license, you'll pay 105 baht for that. The process is really fast and efficient, and I had my driver's license within 10 minutes for both. Now, there's certain information that I left out here, for example, how long your license lasts, yada, yada, yada. And the reason why I did that is because it's actually in your study questions that you're supposed to know. So this is stuff that you're just going to have to study. If you download the applications and you go through them, it'll tell you all of that information. I wanted to make this video as brief as possible, but trust me, the information is provided in those tests. You should study. In my opinion, that's a rigorous test and you really do need to study for it. If you enjoyed this video, please like, comment, and subscribe. It would help me out a great deal. Thank you so very much, everyone.